Welcome to Relationship Equity, a podcast that explores how successful people cultivate meaningful connections with others in their personal and professional lives. Learn from the stories, insights, and advice of leaders, innovators, and influencers who have built strong bonds with their teams, their customers, their communities, and their families. Here's Richard Walker.
My guest today is Barry Conchie, founder of Conchie Associates. Barry is a former Gallup Global Leadership Research and Development Leader and co-author of the bestseller Strengths-Based Leadership. His newest book, The 5 Talents That Really Matter, challenges conventional wisdom about leadership development. Barry, welcome to the show. How are you?
It's great to meet you, Richard. Looking forward to it very much.
Now, where are you right now?
I'm in Boulder, Colorado. Been here for about, 15, 16 years. I spent about 10 years in Washington, D.C. Prior to that, I had a whole career in the U.K. before I came over to the U.S.
Now, that accent of yours, it's unique. And you know, what I've found living in this country now for, well over 30 years, 35 years, is Americans have a very hard time understanding accents. And now where I'm from, I remember, let me tell you a funny story, Barry. I was in Orlando with my then girlfriend, now wife, many years, 1990, I don't know exactly when it was. I sound like my dad now repeating dates. My kids make fun of me because my dad remembers every date there is. And I remember being at Disney, and I was stood listening to a load of people from the UK, and I'd say to Lisa, Liverpool, Birmingham, definitely Newcastle, Yorkshire. Because where I'm from, you can pinpoint, unless people lose their accents and adopt a different one, you can pinpoint where people are from by the way they talk. Now, I can tell you're from very close to where I'm from, Barry.
Yeah, my background's Northern England. You know, back in the days when I was born in what was called the West Riding of Yorkshire.
Right.
And we bordered on the Lake District, which is a stunningly beautiful part of the UK. I was brought up there. My accent originates from there. And then it got refined when I moved down to the Pennines. And I lived between Leeds and Manchester in the hills. And so consequently, there's a little bit of that twang in my accent. But you know, when I talk to a lot of folks, I've been in America now for 25 years.
Yeah.
People still pick up my accent. I mean, I can't go into a room and talk and not be identified as someone from somewhere else other than the US. But most of the time, people accuse me of being an Australian, which is about as an offensive an accusation as anybody could make to me. Or they accuse me of being a Scot, which is a little bit closer to my home area. And occasionally, I've been accused of being a South African, but I don't think I've got an Afrikaner twang. But I think the reason why Americans find it difficult to place English accents is because they don't fully understand that you can drive 20 miles in the UK and not be able to understand the person that you talk to. The best example I can think of is Solihull versus Central Birmingham. You speak to somebody in Solihull, you understand them perfectly well. You go into Central Birmingham and it's like speaking a foreign language. And so that proximity of people with different accents in the UK isn't replicated in the US. I mean, the best we can come up with in the US is maybe the difference between Wisconsin and Boston, where, you know, the sing-songy twang of the Central to Northern Europeans who settled in Wisconsin is fundamentally different to the kind of Irish Americans who settled in Boston. But you don't get that 20-mile variation in the US. It's over a few thousand miles, and then people understand. So you and I share that background.
Yeah, you know, and we could have a whole 4-hour session on the fascination of accents, and probably only the two of us would listen to it back. So we should shelve that. But I have to tell you one very funny story. Well, it was funny to me at the time. 1989, I was in Philadelphia teaching golf. And these kids, a lot of them from Boston. And I thought they were, as we would say, taking the piss out of my accent, as Americans would say, making fun of it. Because they were saying things like, park the car. And that's a very Bostonian type of accent, which, you know, the rest of America is park the car, which is very, very different. But anyway, we could talk about accents and dialects, but I'm really looking forward to diving into to your background, and hopefully our listeners will learn something from our conversation today, because this whole topic of leadership's fascinating, as I said, and I like to see your books in the background there. Let's start there. Let's start with there's so many different ways I can go with this, and I'm going to bounce around, but let's start with your first book. Why did you write it? What inspired you to write your first book?
Well, the first book is the one I wrote that with Tom Rath when I used to head up leadership research and development at Gallup, and that was the reason why I first came to the UK. So I joined Gallup in London in the mid-late 90s, and then I came over to do a global role based in Washington, DC. Tom became a very, very good friend of mine, brilliant guy, amazing brain, just a thoroughly amazing human being. And he and I sat down one day and said, look, we've never put out a leadership book in Gallup. I had a ton of experience in the exec leadership space. Tom had a fantastic research brain. It was a good marriage between the two of us. So we put that book together. It's still selling today. It's sold over 1.4 million copies.
Brilliant.
It's an amazing success. And I guess it gave me a bit more of a public profile by being more well known.
Right.
Leadership circle. But the book that's over my right-hand shoulder, which is A 5 Hours That Really Matter, that I co-authored with my business partner, Sarah Dalton, that was a book I always wanted to write. So ever since I really became fully engaged in the leadership space, I wanted to put out a book that decoded all the critical elements that go into predicting effective leadership. Now, the origination of all that, would probably go back decades. And it always amazed me, the variation in human performance in whatever role I was in. So, you do the job to the best of your ability, and obviously everybody thinks they're better than other people. I guess I was no different. But it was remarkable, the variation in capability. So you'd look around, and it would be easy to spot the people who struggled in role, or the people who never got to the point where they delivered acceptable performance, and yet there were always a bunch of superstars. Essentially, they were very good people. I mean, you'd be able to talk to them and you'd be able to reason with them. They'd be perfectly nice talking to you, but some could do the job to an exceptional level and some couldn't. That intrigued me. And it was through the work I did at Gallup that I started digging into the psychology of that. So what is it that predicts exceptional performance, whatever role you're looking at? And part of that was based on self-awareness. Now, from my perspective, Richard, I made a discovery about myself, or at least admitted it publicly, 25 years too late. And that was that I'm not a very good manager of people.
Hang on, let me stop you there. That hit me in the face, because I had that same realization myself. And I didn't know that I wasn't a very good manager of people. I thought I was, but I clearly was not. I want to know from you, what light bulb went on? How did you come to that realization that you are not, I would say naturally, because what I want to dive into is, do you consider yourself, once you reflected with your self-awareness, that you're not naturally a good manager of people? And what did you do about it then?
The realization, I guess it was staring me in the face for a lot of years. I just denied it. And part of the reason for that is I don't think we're getting very good feedback. I don't think managers generally are equipped for feedback. In the book, we talk about the discovery that 80% of current managers are not fit to be in the job.
That's based on research that you did.
Based on research, yeah. And then from our own perspective, when you elevate that to look at leadership, we find only 4% of leaders in their current role, from our perspective, should be in the job. So, you look at a tiny, tiny percentage of people. And I'm getting around to answering your question about why I'm not a good manager. But there's a research paper came out 5 weeks ago that said if you're looking for absolute exceptional performance in whatever role or activity could identify, expect to find 17 people in a million with that characteristic.
Now, I don't know what percentage that is. What is 0.17 or something? It's very low.
It's a 000 and a small digit afterwards.
Bloody hell.
So the idea that we have that, these high-performing roles are achievable to many is a complete myth. And the fact that managers 80% of them shouldn't be in the job, remember? So there's a fair chance that I worked for a fair number of people like that. They weren't quick to give good feedback. I think essentially they just didn't tell the truth. I should have been told many years ago that I had deficiencies in management that were going to cause me to be.
Hang on, let me stop you there. Do you think there's a possibility, Barry, that it wasn't that they didn't tell you the truth, but they weren't equipped themselves to be able to determine that you weren't really a good manager? Is that a possibility?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think it's both. But I came to the realization myself when I realized that I wasn't very well liked. I would try to build good relationships with people, but I wouldn't do a very good job of it. I would get irritable around people who didn't perform very well. I would give very, very direct feedback myself, and I was giving it to people who couldn't take it because they shouldn't have been in the job as well. And it made me realize that this was something I just wasn't cut out to do. I didn't have the patience. I didn't have the, persistent focus to be able to, give good guidance and good support to the weaker performers around me. Now, the other thing that I noticed was that I tended to gravitate towards a tiny percentage of people, and they tended to want that really, really good performance. For all those characteristics, when you put them together, not really good management quality. And, when I realized that it was a bit of, I really reflected deeply in myself, but I thought, I'm going to tell people. Because that's the other thing that we find in work and in life, that, people are not that good at admitting to what they're not very good at. We are self-effacing to a fault where we don't want to be the most egotistical person on the planet. We don't want to say we're a genius in every situation, but we also are at a fault at the other end where we're not really honest about our shortcomings and our areas of weakness. So I kind of came out, if that's the right term. Now, when I talk to audiences, I'm very direct. If I'm speaking at a conference, I say, look, you need to know I'm not a very good manager of people. And I then follow it up by saying, actually, I don't really like people that much. My wife has got a brilliant way of describing this. She says that my biggest contribution to humanity is that with each house move, we've moved further away from people. And more, I live on a farm with a lot of acreage in Colorado, looking over Rocky Mountain National Park, and we don't have anybody within half a mile of us. And my wife sees that as a positive rather than a negative.
The reason why I've been laughing all along, because you just basically described me to a T, Barry. I mean, every word that you said. We live on an island right now, half the year in Florida, and we live on a 10-acre hobby farm in Minnesota for the other half. It's absolutely fascinating, the words that you said there. I want to go back to the 80%. How did the research that you did without going into the minutiae and every single thing that you did, that's an awfully astounding figure. And it's a shocking number. Why are you so confident that those statistics are accurate? Because, we look at numbers and I'm a cynical as it relates to data and numbers, unless I can really verify them. I'm on the side of don't believe everything you read and hear until you verify it. It is actually the truth and the fact. So I'm not disputing it, but you seem very confident with the 80% number, and it's shocking. Why are you so confident that it's a fact?
It's actually 82.7%. We've got the receipts and the data. So in my company, Richard, we build predictive assessments. We help companies find outstanding people in jobs at all levels. Now, obviously, our latest book is about executive leadership, and the focus of that book is on exceptional leadership. But we apply that principle to every level in an organization. And we build management assessments where we evaluate the capabilities of people against firm research criteria. And we start by studying fantastic managers, and they exist. Now, I would never be one of them, right? But I got the brains to figure out what the characteristics are that go into fantastic management, and we build assessments to predict for that. And the reason I'm confident about that 80% figure is because we've assessed thousands and thousands of managers over the time I've had my business. And when you look at those who achieve the standard of the very best managers, only 2 out of 10 achieve it. And then out of those 2 out of 10, of course, not every one of them gets appointed to a job. So, we've got pretty strong data. So what happens if a company doesn't follow our advice and selects one of the 80% rather than one of the 20%? Well, 9 times out of 10, they fail. 9 times out of 10, they fail. And so that increases our confidence level in what it is we predict with respect to people in management positions. And that's, if you're a manager and you're listening to this and you're thinking, my goodness, am I in this camp or am I in that camp? I mean, there's an easy way of figuring it out. And that is just look internally in your company. Are you top of all the people doing similar jobs on objective performance criteria? If you are, there's a pretty good chance you're in the 2 in 10. You're in the 20%. But if you aren't, and your head isn't high up that chart, pretty good chance you're in the 80%. So you don't need me to tell you that. You can just look at your performance criteria. But the problem is, Richard, I'll get back to that point I made before, companies aren't honest with employees when they give feedback. And I worked with a number of organizations who used to hand out discretionary financial awards at the end of the year. Everybody got a little bit. It was the peanut butter approach. So the very best people might get 2.5%. And the absolute worst people, who in my view should have actually been terminated, would get like 1%. And my question and my view with these organizations is, why can't you give the best people 10% and the poorer people nothing? I mean, they're still getting paid their salary, of course.
Why do you think that is?
I think people find it hard to give tough feedback. And the other thing is, they're concerned about demotivating people. And I have a different view. I have no worry at all about demotivating a poor performer, because the alternative doesn't produce any benefit. If I put all my energy in trying to motivate somebody who can't do the job, they're just going to be more keen not to do the job. And I just think, it's this lack of honesty that really strikes hard. I understand it. I just think it's wrong.
Your words, your opinions, your views, I would say are refreshing, because I've not really heard that perspective said that way before, but I could not agree more with you. I think part of it might be the fear of losing people and not being able to replace them. But let's face it, I mean, shit rolls downhill. And if you got people at the very top that are frankly doing it wrong, then it flows all the way down. Now, let's talk about this whole notion. I want to switch gears on your slide. Well, it's not really switching gears, but you a self-proclaimed poor manager, but no doubt, and no doubt coming where you're from, you're no doubt a modest fella, but you're very honest, which is very refreshing, because that's where I'm from as well. That's how I think. But you're no doubt an exceptional leader. And we talk about the difference between management and leadership. We have a program that we teach. It's called Link to Leadership. And what we do is, with our clients, we bring in early career managers and put them through a 6-month-long program. And the program was created by a bunch of executives and actually taught by the executives. It's a fantastic program. We've been doing it for 18 years now. And we usually have 25 people come through this program every year. And the feedback that we've got from it has been overwhelmingly positive. But that topic always comes up with, what's the difference between management and leadership? And why are some people exceptional leaders like yourself and self-proclaimed poor managers? Why is that? Talk to me about the human psychology there, with why you believe some people, well, first of all, what constitutes an exceptional leader that's also a poor manager, and why is that? And there's a lot thrown at you there, but I'm sure you're tracking with me.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a distinction I'm that bothered about. It doesn't occupy lots of my brain time to think about that distinction between leadership and management. I think the way that I look at it is in linear terms as far as career progression is concerned. It's almost as though you've got to pass through management to get to leadership. Never seen a frontline employee being appointed to the exec team. There are lots of good reasons for that. One of which is, limited experiential footprint. I mean, what has a frontline employee really acquired that would equip them for top level leadership? So I tend to look at management as a necessary evil. Well, necessary evil. Done to excellence, it's phenomenal. Truly transformative to organizations. I wish we could find more people who were like that. But there's something that you acquire as you progress through management levels that better equips you for being an executive leader than if you didn't pass through those management levels. Now, I don't want to be too strict about this because I do believe there are some phenomenal individual contributors who rise through different levels of that route and can still function reasonably well at a leadership level. But the general route is through layers of management. I think, to answer the question personally, I just think I was lucky. I survived. I got through it. I didn't get terminated. Probably I should have been. And if I had been, then maybe my accessibility to leadership levels would have been dead at that point. But I was either lucky or I had people giving me air cover. But I think some people saw something in me that was worth persevering with. And even though I wasn't a very good manager of people, there were other capabilities I was exhibiting that were valuable to the organizations I worked with. And the way to look at it, I think, is this: if you kind of step back. I was taught in the English equivalent of a high school, so a grammar school. I was taught by any number of teachers who were not fit to teach. And then I was taught by one or two utterly brilliant individuals who I loved them to death. They were just marvelous, marvelous people. And I found that at every role I looked at in my professional career, there were just some people I'd go over the wall for, I'd take a bullet for, to use the military analogy. And there were others that I had nothing but utter contempt for. And when I looked at the individuals that I had utter contempt for, they were good people. And I kept thinking, there's a role out there somewhere that's a good fit for you, but it's not the one you're in right now. And that's really what I set up my business to try to help address. So if people who go through any of our assessments don't come through very strongly, we give them feedback and we say, hey, you might want to consider this, you might want to consider that, but let me tell you why the particular role that we don't think you're fit for now, you're not a fit for. Now, when you come back to the question about leadership, when you said, so what is it that makes a good leader and what are the characteristics? That's what we describe in the 5 talents that really matter that we brought out last year. And those 5 talents, really quickly, setting direction. So you need to know where you're going. The second one is harnessing energy. That means energy in yourself, energy in others. The third is applying pressure, and that means influencing people to do things. The fourth is building connectivity, and that's a relationally driven focus. And the fifth is controlling traffic, which is how you set up the systems and processes that enable organizations to function. Now, those are the 5 broad things, therefore, that answer the question, what goes into exceptional leadership? And in the book, we drill it down further into 19 sub-elements because there's more than one way to set direction. There's more than one way to control traffic. There's more than one way to build connectivity across the organization. So the way that you and I are different, and this is just me making a judgment based on our conversation with each other, you are far more relationally sophisticated than I am. And that means I would predict you would be a far better person at connecting to other people than I am. I find that very difficult and I don't like to do it. If I'm in a room of people that I don't know, I'll shrink into the corner and find somebody I do. But you I see you with a much stronger capability in that area. Now, you might not be world class, but you're certainly way, way better than I am. And what we do through our assessment work is we try to find those points of separation between people in order to come up with a prediction that's sound and has some statistical validity to it.
All right, Barry, let's pause here for a tea break. In part 2 of our conversation, Barry Conchie will reveal why He has no interest in public speaking, and much more.
I'm not entertainment. I don't regard myself as entertainment. I don't want to show up in an organization, wow them with a wonderful speech about this, that, or the other, and then leave them. My relationships with is that I work with, in some cases, are over 25 years. And I've gone through several CEO changes. We kind of stick around because the stuff we do works. And I'd rather work with interesting people on engaging projects than be on the speaker circuit where I prostitute my skills for short-term benefit with an audience that's never going to see me again.
This has been Relationship Equity. If you want to take your career, your business, or your personal relationships to the next level, reach out to Richard at yorksolutions.net. You can also get Richard's book, Relationship Equity, your cornerstone investment to great gains in business and life, on Amazon now. Relationship Equity with Richard Walker is a production of Forbes Books.